In today's video, we're going to be looking at a YouTube short from the Atheist YouTube channel, The Atheist Experience. This YouTube short is about morality, and this atheist is basically going to kind of trick this caller into believing God isn't necessary for morality, which is obviously false. Let's go ahead and watch this whole short just for context, and then we'll break it down and destroy it! Alright, here we go.
Okay, it's God's necessary for morality, as you said?
Yes.
Okay, World A baby is thrown off a building, and God exists in that world. Okay, did something wrong happen?
Yes.
Great. World B, a baby's thrown off a building, and there's no God in that world. Did something wrong happen?
You throw a baby off a cliff is wrong, no matter what.
Okay, so God isn't necessary for morality then? That seems like the quickest debunk of a point I think I've ever had on the show.
There's a lot to be said about this, but let's break it down piece by piece. For some context, what is morality? Morality in the most basic sense is right or wrong. Certain behaviors are right, certain behaviors are wrong. There are two camps of thought for morality that are at war with one another: subjective morality and objective morality. Subjective morality argues that morals are dependent on people's opinions. Subjective morality might argue, I don't like racism, but that's my opinion and someone else might have a different opinion. Objective morality argues there is good or bad, right or wrong, independent of people's opinions. For example, racial discrimination is wrong regardless if someone holds the opinion it's right. Alright, let's play some of this video again.
Okay, it's God's necessary for morality, as you said?
Yes.
Alright, so the atheist asked this caller, God's necessary for morality then? The caller says yes. We might ask, why would God be necessary for morality? Can't we have right and wrong in mankind without some God telling us what we can and can't do? Well, let's say we don't need God for morality, and morality comes from humans. You may have the opinion that harming children is wrong. Someone else might have the opinion that harming children is right.
What?
Who would be right? You would say, I am. But wait a second. How is your opinion about morality more valid than someone else's? You could both scream at each other until you're blue in the face saying, I am right. But does that really make you right? If you really believe you're right, you'd have to be appealing to some objective standard that says certain behaviors are actually right or wrong, regardless of people's opinions or preferences. If there is an objective standard for right and wrong, where did it come from? Before we explore that, let's say that there is no objective standard for right or wrong, and morality is dependent on human opinion. Not only would this be absurd, but it would be horrible. It would be absurd because people would be pretending and acting like there is right and wrong when there really isn't. And it would be horrible if there were no objective standard because people that commit heinous crimes like stealing, torturing, and raping little children for fun would not actually be wrong. And atheists, Christians wouldn't be wrong for anything they've done, even if you thought they were. What Hitler did to the Jews would be no different than giving to the poor and helping people in need. This view is obviously unreasonable. Back to the question, if there is an objective standard, where did it come from? You can't know to go 55 on the highway if there was no one to make that law. If there were no lawgiver, you wouldn't have a sign saying speed limit 55 in the first place. Furthermore, you can't get a first down in football if there are no rules to the game. Does atheism have rules to the game? If this universe is the product of uncreated, unintelligent, unguided, unintended, purposeless forces, we don't have an objective standard for morality. We just have human opinion. As C.S. Lewis said, laws come from lawgivers. Moral truth must be grounded in an objective moral standard. Because only beings can be moral, this standard must be a perfectly moral being, and this being we call God. God is described in the Bible as an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing, infinite being that made the universe and humans. He's the best explanation for why objective moral values and duties exist. Keep in mind, if he doesn't exist, everything I said about subjective morality would be true, and there would be no actual right or wrong. Alright, now we can interpret correctly these two scenarios this atheist offers this caller. Here we go.
Okay, World A baby is thrown off a building, and God exists in that world. Okay, did something wrong happen?
Yes.
Alright, so God exists in this world and a baby's thrown off the building. Is this wrong? Yes, that's the only reason something could be wrong, because there's an objective standard for morality.
Great. World B, a baby's thrown off a building, and there's no God in that world. Did something wrong happen?
You throw a baby off a cliff is wrong, no matter what.
Okay, so God isn't necessary for morality then? That seems like the quickest debunk of a point I think I've ever had on the show.
If God didn't exist in this world, as the atheist said, there would be no objective moral standard. So throwing babies off of buildings would be no different morally than buying houses for the homeless, giving to charity, or rescuing animals. Is that reasonable? It's funny because this atheist is trying to get this caller to admit that throwing babies off of buildings is wrong even if God doesn't exist, but ironically, throwing babies off of buildings can only be wrong if God does exist. In conclusion, atheism cannot offer a good explanation for morality, as you simply end up with human opinion being your standard for right or wrong. This is why it is more reasonable to believe morality is objective and comes from this all-good being we call God.